Hello everybody! Welcome back to another Jedi Dropouts Productions one-shot. I'm your host, Ryan Taylor, and hello again. It's been a while. First time recording anything at all in roughly a month, so excuse me, I may be a little rough, maybe a little bit rusty. Today, I'm sitting down with a very good and old friend of mine, Mr. Will Sullivan. Will, say hello.
How you doing, folks?
Before we get into how we know each other and so on, let's reveal, what are we talking about today?
What are we talking about?
Yeah.
We are talking about Final Fantasy.
You're fucking right. Now, let me preface this with saying I have played half of Final Fantasy 15, and that is it. I am pretty fucking green when it comes to Final Fantasy. And I'm 2 pots of coffee deep. I don't know the games, and I've never been more excited to talk about them.
Well, at least you started with the latest one, or one of the more later ones.
Yeah, and I feel like...
I'm sure not a whole lot of people have played most of the older games. They're probably more familiar with some of the newer ones.
Yeah, no, of course. Yeah. So, me and you have been trying to sit down and record one of these since what? December, January? Something like that?
Yeah, it's definitely been a few months, but, stuff comes up, and then, people get married and stuff like that.
Yeah,
so
some people do get married, apparently. I don't know who they are.
I don't know.
First time, I guess, recording a podcast as a married man, and not much different.
No?
No, it's about the same.
No strange powers, no weird appendages coming out of your body nowhere now.
Yeah, we'll see. The marriage is still pretty fresh. So, I guess we should talk very quickly about how we know each other. I guess it all starts with Spectrum Security, the Avalon Mall, co-workers for a couple of years. That was what 4 years ago now?
2014, yeah. So, not yesterday.
No, not at all. But you can't really just say coworkers, because I mean, we were coworkers and that's how we met, but from there, bandmates briefly.
Yeah.
I drummed for you for a little while there, and I mean, since then it's just been video game and music talk on a pretty much daily basis.
Yeah, pretty much. And anime, as you've recently gotten into.
Anime, yep.
Yeah, there's definitely a few topics that we've discussed overnights as well. But.
Oh, absolutely. And that's the thing. Like, you're another one of those close friends that every time we're together, and even when we're not, like, we have these sorts of conversations. We go deep onto the geekier side of topics. So I feel like it was only a matter of time before you got into a podcast here with us somehow.
Yeah, certainly. And I mean, some people who would know me, it's probably kind of obvious I would do something on Final Fantasy, but this is the semi-weekly geek out, so I might as well talk about a series I know pretty well and I've played for most of my life, really.
Yeah, that's actually a good segue. That's a good starting point. What's your earliest memory of Final Fantasy, if you can reach that far back?
Whoa. Let's see. Well, I started with one of the Game Boy games, actually.
Really?
Which are technically... okay, just to start, is I had to go back and add, or try to count how many Final Fantasy games there are. And there are a fuckload of them.
Yeah.
I couldn't even count all of them, but there's 15 main games.
Yeah.
Of the main line. First one released in '87, which is just a few years shy of when I was born, so it's a pretty old series.
Wow, yeah.
And so there's 15 main games. There's a whole lot of spin-offs and like other main series related titles like sequels. There's only a few sequels.
Yeah.
Like sequels, but I
And
mean, if I were to add up all of them, there's probably 40 or 50 Final Fantasy titles.
yeah, it's insane to think about, just because.
Yeah, there's games that are like semi-related, which is what I was going into. There's 3 games on Game Boy called the Legend series, Final Fantasy Legend 1, 2, and 3.
Okay.
Which are okay. They're like very turn-based, and it's like first-person. So you'll have like your enemies in front of you, and you'll select a party. You select all your commands for your party. So that was the first game that I ever played, was Final Fantasy Legend 2.
You mean first
RPG I ever played.
Oh, first Final Fantasy game or first game? Like
the first Final Fantasy game.
wow, that's a left field choice there.
Yeah, well, my brother had a Game Boy when we were young, and we had The Legend of Zelda: Link's Awakening, which is an amazing game,
Yeah.
probably my favorite Zelda game.
Yeah.
There was 2 Super Mario Land
Oh yeah, yeah.
and Super Mario Land 2 that we had, and there's a Castlevania game. So we played those a bunch.
Nice.
And I was like, yeah, this Final Fantasy game is kind of cool. It's kind of hard. It's kind of random. Because the enemy attacks were very right. It's very old school RPG, like text based almost. But,
Yeah.
apparently, that series was a spin-off and eventually became the Saga series, like Saga Frontier.
Really?
Well, yeah, which were based on PlayStation games.
And that's another thing. Like, you're talking about having trouble counting all the Final Fantasy titles, but then when you talk about like games that originally were or crossovers with different series. I mean, Kingdom Hearts, that kind of thing.
Yeah, Kingdom Hearts. That's a whole other.
Yeah, like it's staggering the amount of titles that fall even loosely under the Final Fantasy banner.
Yeah, it's a gargantuan IP among all of the other IPs that Square Enix have held their own.
Yeah,
they're a gigantic company.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, that was my first experience with Final Fantasy.
Nice.
A little bit different than the other games, but
absolutely.
For a handheld title, pretty big actually.
Yeah.
I haven't played that in a long time. Might have to boot up an emulator one of these days. So that was the Saga series, and there was another one called Game Boy one called Final Fantasy Adventure.
Okay. Yeah.
Which eventually became the Mana series of games, like Secret of Mana.
Oh, really?
Yeah. That one was very not live action, but like action adventure.
Okay, yeah.
It was a better term. And of course, if anyone who's played Secret of Mana, that's what that game's like.
And again, that's a huge title, right? Like Secret of Mana has a fucking big following.
It's so strange that some of these series, because they're made by like other people, other directors.
Yeah.
But they work with Square, and they're like, well, we'll put it under this. And then it just got spun off into its own series.
Yeah.
So I was playing that game, and then the game that basically got me into the series was Final Fantasy II, or Final Fantasy IV, as its real name. And that's yet another mystery of this series, that some of them are not even labeled the same in the U.S. as they are in Japan originally.
Yeah, that's a whole thing, too.
Just Steve, you guys have mentioned before, you didn't on the podcast.
Yeah, I remember attempting to to explain it and probably fucking it up terribly.
So I'll attempt to explain that whole debacle as well with this podcast.
Yeah. So okay. You know what? Just go for it. I know the first. It's among the first couple games within like the first 5 or 6 that the titling issues are changed, right?
Well, was that the first 5 or 6 games?
Was that?
Did I say that again?
Yeah, no, I just go for it. Just explain which ones have the different titles, because I can't follow it at all.
Oh, okay, yeah. Well, I started kind of an early history of the series, so I can kind of go with that.
Yeah.
Final Fantasy 1 was released in Japan in '87, I think I said.
Yeah.
And the series started by this guy named Hironobu Sakaguchi.
There you go.
Who was a Square employee. Apparently wanted to be a musician.
I believe that.
Yeah, I know that's a field thing. But he was in university for engineering or something. Started making video games. And Square had released a few titles at this time, but they weren't doing too well. Apparently, he worked on Rad Racer as well.
Okay, yeah.
They made a few other titles, but he was like, "This isn't really working out." So he started making this title, which he wanted to call Fighting Fantasy. And he's like, "Well, this isn't really working out. Maybe if this game doesn't do very well, I'll just quit video games and go back to being a musician or whatever he wanted to do." But luckily it worked out. It sold very well and it was very popular in Japan and saved Square, saved the company. He changed the name to Final Fantasy because it was easy to remember, and there was some copyright issue with something else called Fighting Fantasy.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah.
The legendary video game series Fighting Fantasy that sold millions of copies.
And it did work in with the whole, this might be my last game type thing.
Yeah.
It was inspired a lot by Dragon Quest.
Of course, yeah, I can see that.
Which was known as Dragon Warrior over here in the U.S. until 2006 for some reason. You can't have anything make sense. But Dragon Quest introduced a party system and a lot of those kinds of side quests and the turn-based battles and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I haven't played many of those. I played Dragon Quest 4 a little bit, which is kind of one of the big ones. Dragon Warrior is the national sport of Japan. It's very popular over there. Not so much over here. I guess Final Fantasy took that role in the West. I'm not sure why, but
it's interesting, isn't it?
I'll blame Final Fantasy 7 because that game is really what did it. But we'll get into that.
Yeah.
That was made by Enix, Square, with Dragon Quest.
Okay, yep.
And now Square Enix owns both of them, and they own a lot of other IPs as well.
Yeah.
Tomb Raider and Hitman and stuff.
Yeah, they're a juggernaut.
So many. But, so the game was a success, and they're like, well, we'll make a sequel and such. So Final Fantasy II was the next one on NES. The first 3 games are on Nintendo, the first Nintendo system.
Yes.
Final Fantasy II was very different in that it didn't offer a normal level up system.
Okay.
basically you had, if I remember right, yes, you had magic and like you bought spells, and you had weapon skills for different weapon types like swords and axes and things like that. But basically, the more you use each one, it level up, which is something that the Elder Scrolls started using. Well, when the Elder Scrolls became a thing, and in Oblivion and Skyrim and such, you just use a skill. The more you use it, the more it levels up.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. So that's pretty unique in that you could just keep using fire or cure over and over, and it'll increase as long as you're actually doing something.
And not just in RPGs, but like that's something I see in open world like action adventure games now. Like that's kind of made its way as like a mainstay gaming staple. Yeah.
I think this is the first game to ever do it, which is saying something.
Yeah, I know.
It being from the late 80s, that's pretty revolutionary.
It really is.
But this game and Final Fantasy III, the sequel after that, were not released in the West until 2006 or something.
Really? That late?
Yeah, they were on the DS. I think they re-released them on the DS.
Okay.
In 3D, and they were pretty cool actually because they had functionality and stuff like that.
Nice.
Basically, I'm not sure why. I think they were too hard. They're not easy games for sure, but like I said, with Final Fantasy II, you can't just like grind levels or whatnot. You have to be very careful of how you build your characters and such, but you could build them however you wanted. Yeah, I'm not sure.
So
I think that was why, because they were more difficult than previously, and they figured they wouldn't do so well in the West.
So what it comes down to with the titles is they didn't release certain titles in the U.S. and
specifically Final Fantasy V. They didn't release that here until later on as well, because it was deemed too difficult, and it's not an easy game, sure.
Yeah, and so when they released the next game and actually released it in the U.S., they skipped they instead of skipping the numbers, they just titled different games different numbers.
Yeah, that's right. So the next game that was released was Final Fantasy IV on the Super Nintendo.
Yeah.
But that was released in the U.S., so they couldn't call it 4. That would have been confusing.
Of course
so
it would have.
They call it Fantasy 2, and that's the game that really got me into this series was Final Fantasy 2, because it set the bar for what a Final Fantasy game should be.
Yeah.
Music-wise, I mean, Nobuo Uematsu is the main series composer up until 10, I believe, FF10.
Okay.
So it features a lot of great music.
Yeah.
From him and some classic themes. It has a really good story, very fleshed out characters, and because before that there was a storyline, but I guess limitations of the NES, you couldn't do it quite the same.
No, of course, yeah. Want a quick tangent over to the music for a second, because that's like a whole thing.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, Final Fantasy is known for its some of its classic themes, like the prelude, which is the do 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 the harp, and the victory fanfare that a lot of people will probably know.
Yeah, no, of course, yeah.
But Uematsu, basically, he writes the music based on the scenario. He'll get the scenario of the game, and he'll start, once all that's basically complete, he'll start doing out the themes for different characters, and he'll really talk with the scenario writer to get the feel of how the music should be.
Yeah.
And really, speaking of music in video games and video games as an art form, I think he's a genius. I love a lot of the music from these games. I have the soundtracks just there, just to listen to. Like,
yeah. I do know.
It's only gotten better. What's that?
I do know the music to the games, even though I haven't played them, because in playing Final Fantasy 15, I discovered the fact that you could buy the old scores and play them in your car in the and so
you even get an iPod you can go around with. Oh, sorry, a music player that you can go around with, which is, I don't know. I think that's a nice touch among all the other things in that game.
Well, it let me explore some of those scores that I heard so much about, and it was kind of fun, you know, like seeing these beautiful current gen open world graphics and hearing the classic scores alongside it. It was pretty cool.
Yeah, well, I found even the battle themes too just fit perfectly.
Oh, really?
Even though you're not playing the same game at all.
Yeah, they did though.
The music translates very well to, you know, like I said, it's only gotten better now. They have like full orchestras and stuff like that they can put into the games, because before it was the 16-bit. You can only do so much.
And that's the thing, like, listening back to some of the stuff that this guy managed to do with those old sound cards, like, he really found creative ways to get around those limitations. Yeah, for sure. And there's a lot of, like, piano collections and even, like, metal. Like, there's a lot of heavy guitar and stuff that he's put into his themes. Very diverse. Yeah, absolutely.
And matches the series because it's almost always been a mixture of fantasy and sci-fi, which I always really liked.
Of course, yeah.
You know, every game is unique, and they really try to push the mold in every direction. One reason why I really like this series, other series do it, but there's something about Final Fantasy that really draws people in, RPG players as well, because they always try to make, like, even the battle systems are all different in each series, each game.
Yep.
Yes. Final Fantasy 4.
Just a quick note for the listeners at home. My neighbor has started mowing his lawn, so you might pick that up.
Can we get that in 16-bit? That would be great.
Oh yeah, perfect.
Yeah.
So I don't know how long that'll last, but we're just gonna roll with it.
Yes, that's all I can do.
Yep.
Yeah, so this game pushed the boundaries in a lot of ways that really set the bar for what this series would be. That was the first real game that I played, and, you know, played the hell out of that. It's about 20 hours long.
Yep.
There's a lot of side quests and, you know, end game bosses, raid bosses you can do. I don't know if it's one of my favorites, probably for that reason, that it was one of the first that I played.
Yep.
I don't know if I'd be able to rank all of these games, but there's definitely a few that are in my top list.
Yeah. I wouldn't ask you to rank them. Just you had a hard enough time trying to actually get a list of all of them, to count them. Like, ranking is out of the question.
The ones I didn't know about. There's a few that are like Japan only, like mobile games.
Yeah.
And
okay.
Those are all spin-offs, mainly.
Yeah.
But there's a few things that I'm trying to think now that I found out that I didn't know. Right. Yeah, it would definitely be hard to rank them.
Yeah.
If I believe you asked me once what games if you were to pick one or go back to play, what ones would I suggest? So you could definitely pick Final Fantasy 4.
Yeah.
I mean, these are all emulatable, and you can get the ROMs and stuff on download them on PC.
Yep. Okay, here's an idea.
Yeah.
Could you narrow it down to maybe, say, a top 3 or a top 5, something like that?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, so 1 second.
I could say it would be my favorite one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Before you get into that, we're gonna take a quick break. We'll be right back with your top 3 or top 5 or whatever you're gonna do in just a moment. Okay, so we're back. I closed the window to see if that would help muffle my neighbor's lawnmower out a little bit. I'm sure you can still hear it a little bit, but it should be a little bit better. So, as we were just saying, and he stopped mowing his lawn. That must be a very small lawn, I guess. You were going to try and list, maybe in order, maybe not in order, your top 3 or top 5 Final Fantasy games?
Yeah. Well, this one, 4, would definitely be there.
Yeah.
Mainly for the reasons I said.
Of course, yeah.
I think it holds up pretty well these days compared to other RPGs.
And that would
Final
be...
Fantasy would definitely be there as well.
Yeah. Just to go back a second here. 4 is it's like a 16-bit game, right? Or 8-bit, or
yeah. It introduced Kane the Dragoon, who's one of the series kind of fan favorites, I guess. One of the more noticeable characters of the series.
No, I was just gonna say, in terms of it holding up, I find that era of graphics holds up much better than some of the other stuff from like early PlayStation era when it got...
Oh, sure, and
yeah.
especially these days when like the retro thing is cool again.
Of course,
and developers are making games in that style.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't really have a NES when I grew up. I had a Super Nintendo. A lot of that art style, I really like. And it has, some of those cool looking things like Mode 7.
Okay.
And some of these games really showed off that technology as well. Like the Mode 7 is the scrolling.
Okay.
So it'll like when you're in the airship, if the ship will go up in the air and you'll see the world below you will like curve and like you're going around it and stuff like that.
Yeah, no, I know what you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah. Final Fantasy VI did that really well. When you're on the Chocobo,
okay,
it'll switch to a top-down view, and I guess back then it was pretty mind-blowing to see that kind of technology. But
well, yeah, because
that's where the series kind of pushed forward.
Yeah.
Video games.
Back, just a tangent here.
Somebody.
What was that?
So many tangents.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's Jedi Dropouts, man. We do tangents better than anybody.
We're not organized. Who knows what organization is?
I find with when you're talking about older games and when they do something to sort of like introduce like you said, a new what was it, Mode 7? A graphical change or a new battle system or something like that. Like everything was such a bigger deal back then because the technology was at a point that every change changed everything. Whereas right now it's like the video games that are coming out are fucking impressive and amazing, but it's harder to see the differences because the technology is so advanced.
Yeah, everything's gotten to a point where it's like there's a certain standard. So especially game engines, a lot of them use the Unreal Engine or something.
Yeah.
So it might look similar.
Yeah.
And it's harder to make different particular changes.
Yeah, of course.
Per video game, yeah.
Anyway, you're talking about 6.
If I was to list, yeah.
Yeah.
Final Fantasy VII would be another one of my top. I'll say top 3.
Okay.
Final Fantasy 4, 7, and 12. That's the 3 I'm going to pick.
Okay. I'm not too familiar with 12.
12 was the last one on PlayStation 2.
Okay.
Speaking of technology, because that game really pushed the PS2 to its limit with how much they crammed into it.
Yeah.
The content, it's got like 100 hours of gameplay, probably at least.
How many discs did that take for 12?
How many, what?
How many discs?
Oh, how many discs?
Yeah.
Yes, the disc, the infamous discs. Well, just one on PS2.
Really? Okay.
12, yeah. Most of the PlayStation 1 games were 3 or 4 disc.
Yeah.
Another semi-tangent, but there was... so Final Fantasy VI was the last one on Super Nintendo.
Yeah.
And when they were starting to develop the next game, which would be Final Fantasy VII, so it's not so much tangent, they were still with Nintendo. So they were like, well, the cartridge is still kind of limiting, right?
Yeah.
There's only so much they could pack into a cartridge. But I believe you can still find footage of Final Fantasy VII, the opening sequence done on the N64, like those graphics.
Okay.
Yeah, it's weird. It looks kind of like Ocarina of Time.
Interesting.
But Nintendo were developing the CD system with Philips, which led to the infamous Zelda CDI games.
Of course.
And through the jigs and reels, they kind of screwed up, and Sony were like, we're going to make our own system called the PlayStation, which was disc-based. And Square was like, well, that will help us out with our games because we want to make bigger and bigger games. So they jumped ship and went to the PlayStation. For a long time, that really set a precedent in video game history.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
Yeah. So they could do more with the higher capacity CDs. Until the GameCube. Once the GameCube was shown to have disc, they started eyeing Nintendo again, and they released a few spin-off games on the GameCube called Crystal Chronicles and some other ones like that.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah. But to get back to Final Fantasy 12, they packed a lot into that game, a lot of gameplay. It's turn-based, but it's also like free roaming, so you can roam around the map in real time, kind of like FF15, since you're used to playing that game.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. But it was still turn-based, so you had a time bar that went up, and then you can execute attacks, but there wasn't a battle screen. Which, one of the things I really love about that game and why it would be on this list is because there's so much to do. There's a lot of side quests. There's different ways you can kind of build your characters, like you can choose what weapons they use, lots of different weapon types, what spells they use. Story's pretty cool. It's very old school. Meets, the evil empire that they usually have to try to defeat. It's actually set in a subworld of Final Fantasy called Ivalice.
Okay.
Yeah, which another game, Final Fantasy Tactics, was set in. Another spin-off, which is a real-time strategy game like Fire Emblem.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. That was released on PlayStation. So those are the three games that I would probably put on the top of my list for Final Fantasy.
Awesome. I expected 14 to maybe be in there.
Well, that's the runner-up.
Yeah.
That's separate because it's an MMO, I guess.
Okay.
But, we can. I'll say something about that later. But that's a runner-up for me as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, that game has a special place in my psyche in regards to video games.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's hard to rank all of them or to give individual thoughts because they're all very different. And I played a lot of them when I was younger. I've replayed these games so many times.
Yeah.
Just because they have that replay value. I mean, if they go back now, it might feel a little not old, like, because some people really want Final Fantasy to go back to the turn-based aspect, where it's the later games have definitely changed that.
Yes.
They've gone more action-based. Just fine. I like both of them, but I don't think it's ever going to go back to the strictly turn-based. There are still series doing that. Persona, I believe, is turn-based, isn't it?
Yep, Persona is.
Yeah, I've never played any of those.
I'm pretty inexperienced. A little bit of 4, a little bit of 5, but I've watched a lot of it because Charlotte's big on them.
Yeah, I heard they're really good. I heard 5 is really good. So, I mean, totally different than the big one in the room, which is Final Fantasy. But
yeah,
it's a series that's become very popular. It's kind of like Metallica, right? Metallica definitely made metal the mainstream, the name everyone knows.
Yes.
And everyone knows Final Fantasy in some respect. Not so much these days because it's gotten a different kind of. It's not as popular, but I mean, it's not like it's the mid '90s or the late '90s where there were so many RPGs on PlayStation 1.
Yeah.
A lot of good ones.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure there's some bad ones, but there was a lot of. It was like a golden age for RPGs.
Yeah.
And then you had like the mid 2000s where you had Halo and Call of Duty and Fortnite is the only thing now that's really on everyone's mind.
I think a good comparison, maybe not quite as big, but Doom, perhaps? Because Doom really was the catalyst for the first-person shooters genre, and it's not the biggest game in the world right now, but it has its following, and people do play them and get excited.
Oh, for sure. And it's cool to see that that's come back.
Yeah.
They're making new ones, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
Final Fantasy had its particular heyday, and the newer games are still really good. Final Fantasy 15 being the latest one. That's about 2 years old now. It came out 2016, finally, after such a long development period.
That was a very, very long wait.
Well, it was announced at E3 2006.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah.
Wow, 2006.
Yeah.
It was supposed to be a sequel to what would be Final Fantasy 13. They planned for 2 or 3 games in this world, this like little sub-realm that they had.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure the exact reason now, but I think Square Enix kind of got too ambitious. They got a little too full of themselves because they released a movie called Final Fantasy: The Spirits Within.
Yes.
Which I'm not sure if you knew of.
I remember when it came out. Yeah, I didn't.
Yeah,
I didn't know the games at the time, but
movies are spin-offs.
Yeah.
It was okay. It's not very Final Fantasy-like, but it's a good sci-fi film.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. But it bombed in the box office. It was not good for Square Enix.
No.
Actually, they were Square at the time. It almost stopped their merger with Enix, apparently. But the success of whatever game it was at the time, I think it was 9. They were like, oh, so this will work. So they merged with Enix and became the company they are. But I think the beginning of that period was a little rough for the company. They announced 2 or 3 games they were working on. Even Kingdom Hearts 3 is only just being finally released, and that was in production for a long time.
Yep.
Yeah. So they got renamed. It was called Versus 13.
Yes.
Yeah, and a little way down the line, it got renamed as 15, but it was eventually released, and it's a pretty good game, I think.
Yeah.
You said you played about half of it.
Yeah, roughly.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a good game, but I think it suffers from that whole issues that Square was suffering from. It's like they tried to put in a lot of different elements, and it wasn't, there are too many cooks, as one reference is the way I'll put it.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah. But I think hopefully the company has learned from their mistakes, and they start putting out things on track.
Maybe. We'll see.
Yeah. We'll see.
Kingdom Hearts 3 isn't out yet, so it's got a release date, but we'll see.
I only played the first one, which was good.
I have not played them at all.
They're better than you would expect.
Yeah.
People will probably figure it's like, well, Square meets Disney, so how would that work? But
yeah.
Anyway.
Did you want to get into 14 at all? I know you are one of the bigger supporters that I know of this game.
We can, because it is related to what I was just talking about with Square Enix being too full of themselves and dropping the ball on projects, because that game almost ended the company.
Yeah, exactly. That had a really, really rough release, if I'm not mistaken.
I don't know if Mitchell has mentioned anything about the history of the game, but
so
there's
1 second before you get started. Mitchell has a side podcast. It's called Wasted Potential, hosted by Trigger and Chaos. And what they do is they will take a video game series or a movie or a TV show or whatever they want to talk about. They'll talk about a favorite of theirs. And then on the following episode, they talk about everything they wish would be changed about it. And that's the whole idea of the podcast, right? So they recently did a 3-part episode on Final Fantasy XIV.
Right.
Yeah, so I recommend anyone interested in that game, yourself included, go check that out. I've linked it on our Facebook page before, but I will mention it again. Anyway, go right ahead, get into it.
Cool. Yeah, I might have to go listen to that. Final Fantasy XI was the first MMO of the series. Final Fantasy XIV being the second one.
Mm-hmm.
So, they started to build or grow into that realm of the massively multiplayer online games.
Yep.
Which fit the series of Final Fantasy very well, because you can, you have different job classes, and you have the chocobo mounts and all kinds of things.
Yeah.
So that game was precursor to World of Warcraft. It was released before that, so it it's such an old game, which people still play, oddly enough. But they wanted to make a sequel.
Okay.
And so they started working on what would be Final Fantasy 14. In 2010, the game was released. And even in beta, it was not good. There were a lot of issues that they figured that they could just patch through. And, that's setting a precedent for the way games are now. They're released half broken, or they try to patch them and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But this game came out to a lot of negative reviews, and a lot of the fans were not happy with what they were paying for because, it's a sub-based game, so it wasn't good.
Yeah.
It ended up being that I'm not sure if they fired, but they definitely removed the director of the game from running it. And they put in a new guy named Naoki Yoshida, Yoshi P, as we call him affectionately.
Okay.
He's had some history with MMOs and different games for Enix, I believe he worked for.
All right.
Yeah. So they put him in basically just to get the game on track. He would say, like, well, how long will it take to make this piece of content? And he put a schedule in, and that actually started to get the game going pretty well. Started implementing even chocobos. I don't think chocobos were in the game originally, at least not with the schedule they had. So
yeah.
So they managed to patch it a little bit after that, which was pretty good. Made the fans pretty happy, but they noticed that basically the game was there was no way you could fix it. It was fundamentally flawed in the code. So Yoshida went to Square Enix board and he's like, well, we got two options. We can either continue with the game the way it is, and that will probably ruin the Final Fantasy name and even the company name. It was a big financial loss for them.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah. Or they could basically remake it. And he started work on the version 2.0 of the game, which is called A Realm Reborn.
All right, okay.
And luckily, Sony or Square Enix trusted them and went with that option because it's worked out really well. The cool thing with that is that they put the restart of the game into the lore of the world that it's set in, which is Eorzea.
All right. Okay.
When I started playing this game, I thought, well, because they mentioned it in the game, it's called the Calamity.
Okay.
This big, catastrophe that occurs 5 years beforehand. But it actually occurred in game. They had all kinds of public events, like monsters spawning in town and stuff like that. And there's this giant meteor that is one of the moons of this world that crashes down. And there's a cutscene and they can do on YouTube and stuff like that. And that's it. The servers go down, and 6 months later they release A Realm Reborn, which is it's still the same game. It has the same world and the same races and characters, but it's basically 5 years later, like a sequel.
That's really cool.
Yeah, it's very rare that a game can come back from such a disastrous launch.
Yeah.
And to come back with such a win, because it launched to really good reviews, and they patch, they release new content regularly because they had a good schedule. It's a game that got me into MMORPGs because I had never played World of Warcraft or anything before that. But it's a Final Fantasy game, so it really lends itself well to that kind of series. With a really rich world and, of course, amazing music and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I started playing it in 2015, right before the launch of the first expansion, which is called Heaven's Ward.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. So I've been playing it about, 3 years. I took a year off.
Yeah.
I got into some other games, namely Destiny.
Of course.
At the time. That's a whole other rabbit hole.
Yeah, that's a whole different episode.
Yeah. But I played some other MMOs as well. Neverwinter, which is based on D&D.
Oh,
or
yeah,
inspired
yeah.
by D&D. And Elder Scrolls Online. Both of those are pretty good. They're not quite the same quality though because, they're free to play now. Elder Scrolls Online was a sub originally, but almost all of them go free to play eventually.
Yeah.
But this game you pay a sub for. But for me, I think it's very worth it because, one, there's no hacking or anything. It's very rare to have any kind of situation like that. So your data is very secure, and but you get regular updates. It helps locate for servers and stuff like that. And I mean, it's there, right? If you want to take a month off or however long, I took a year off, so your character will still be there. You can come back to it.
Nice.
To play. I don't know. It's definitely got a place in my mind as probably one of the greatest games I've ever played. Particularly Heaven's Ward because it's such a amazing story and it really, it's very emotional, like the stuff they're talking about, and for an expansion where most games these days they're really DLC or something like that. It's like it might seem like they're just trying to money grab, right?
Yeah, sort of half-assed.
Yeah, I mean, this one expansion is at least, 30, 40 hours of content at least. And they plan them for about 2 years. So they're in their second expansion now, which is called Stormblood.
Yeah.
It's very Eastern themed, very like medieval Japan and Asia. Which is pretty cool. I think seeing it in such like high quality graphics and the music and stuff is it's really neat to see, and it's a very customizable game too. The most customizable I've ever played. You can change your HUD and everything. You can move it around and stuff. For me, it's kind of like the quintessential Final Fantasy in a way. I mean, it's not turn-based, so most people would probably just write it off as, it's not like the old games, but they put in elements of the previous titles as well, kind of as also as fan service, but they do it very tastefully.
Okay, yeah.
It's not like they just throw it in because here's Cloud, stuff like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're running a little short on time here, but I had an idea I'd like to give a shot here, if you're up for it.
Yeah.
Got a little speed round, is what I'm going to call this. Nothing too tricky, no curveballs, but I'm going to throw a couple of Final Fantasy questions at you, and just give me the first answer that comes to your head here.
Sure.
Okay. First off, who would you say is your favorite Final Fantasy protagonist?
Protagonist?
Yeah.
I mean, I suppose I'll say Cloud.
Yeah, Cloud.
Yeah.
He's probably the most.
If you wanted the first person who came to my head, probably Cloud Strike.
Well, I mean, if you do have one like a more of a favorite, it doesn't have to be necessarily the first one that comes to your head, but
yeah, he's definitely up there.
Yeah.
I mean, FS has lots of great side characters.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, but usually the protagonist would be like Final Fantasy VI doesn't really have a protagonist. They have like 14 main characters. They're all play their part in the story, so it's not like it's just one person's story. For example.
Okay.
That's a pretty cool feature. Yeah.
Okay, fine. I'll revise the question. Who's your favorite Final Fantasy playable character?
To play as.
What was that?
I'll probably still say Cloud. Actually.
Okay.
Yeah. And hopefully, if Final Fantasy VII Remake ever releases, it'll be cooler because it'll look the way like the way it should, right?
If that ever releases, I will definitely be playing it.
I think next year for the first part. They're doing it in sections.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, which again, people are kind of like, oh, it's episodic, but like, it's a big game. If they were going to do every single part recreated the way they want to, then it's going to be a big game.
Yeah.
The first disc will. But I think that will really get people back into the series too, especially people like yourself who haven't really played that game.
Yeah.
But it's to me, it's probably a game that everyone should try out at least once because it's such a trendsetter.
Yeah, I mean it's one of the biggest games ever made.
Yeah, it's
in terms of popularity.
Yeah.
Okay. Next question. Off the top of your head, do you have a favorite track from a soundtrack of one of these games, like a favorite piece of music written for a Final Fantasy game?
There are many, but if I were to pick one offhand, it would probably be Dragon Song from Final Fantasy XIV.
Cool.
That's the main theme from Heaven's Ward.
Okay.
It's like the main theme, and they take different versions of that for different parts of the game too.
Okay.
That are some could be completely different. Some might be a metal version, but it has the theme. It's like a variation on a theme type thing from classical music.
Yeah.
Very emotional piece, and that's probably one that I would definitely put on the list. Again, there's so many tracks, but
I know. It's I'm asking you to pick one from a list of fucking hundreds and hundreds, right?
Yeah. If I were to pick one, it would be that one, mainly because it's such a beautiful piece of music.
Okay. You can go with game or series here, but what would you say is your favorite Final Fantasy spin-off?
Spin-off?
Yeah. Be it game or series, you know.
I would say Final Fantasy Tactics.
Okay, yeah. That's one of the more popular ones for sure.
Yeah. The strategy-based, turn-based one.
Yeah, okay.
Because it's different for a Final Fantasy game. It is turn-based, but it's, you have an army or a collection of party members who you have to move along this grid like Fire Emblem.
Yeah.
But it has the job system, so you can have many different kinds of classes on the field. It has a really cool storyline, very totally twists and turns with secrets, and you don't know what's going on, and people, telling you one thing, but then the whole world gets turned on its head. Final Fantasy is good for that in some ways. It'll take a big, a big cliffhanger or a big twist in the story, and you don't know what the thing will happen next. But that game does it very well. So.
Okay. Yep.
Yeah.
Here's a fun one. Favorite out of the entire series, boss battle.
Oh, boss battle.
Yeah.
Oh, let's see. If I was gonna go old school, it would be. Probably one of the weapons from Final Fantasy VII.
Okay.
There are 3 kind of like raid bosses or secret bosses. One is Diamond Weapon, one is Emerald Weapon, and Ultimate Weapon is the other one, but he is a separate boss. So I would say Emerald Weapon is definitely one of my favorites, mainly because you play them underwater.
Cool.
You kind of have a time limit, unless you equip a materia that will take that away. But he's not exactly easy. You have to be pretty maxed out with your party in order to fight him or kill him. But those were some pretty cool boss battles in that game. 2 of which weren't even released in Japan. I think 2 of those battles were only in the US only. Weird, strangely enough.
Okay.
Yeah, but I think I would pick that one.
Good answer. And the last question I have for you here, and I guess some advice for anyone listening. If you were to recommend a Final Fantasy game for someone to start with, regardless of consoles available or any of the tech, just based on game alone, what would you say is the best entry point for someone who's never played?
If I were to recommend one, it would definitely be Final Fantasy VI.
Yeah?
It's still pretty easy to play. Like, it's on the SNES Classic.
Mm-hmm.
So if anyone has picked up one of those, you can play it in pretty much the way it was released. Like, the frame rate and everything is good. The graphics are all good.
Yeah?
I mean, you can play it on ROM or emulator, but...
Oh, yeah, of course.
I don't think it's that expensive to buy the cartridge, though.
No.
If you wanted to go that... No. But, again, a game that really set the bar for a Final Fantasy game. It's got a ensemble of characters, like 14 main protagonists.
Of course.
You can have up to 4 in the party, but you can pick out of all of those. They all have different skills. You even got a Moogle in your team, for one.
Nice.
It's the classic era for Super Nintendo. Got some great music in it.
Of course, yeah.
It's one of those rare examples where kind of the bad guy wins, at least at one point. He actually ends up destroying most of the world the way you knew it.
Spoiler alert.
Yeah, spoiler alert. I mean, you get him afterward, but I would recommend that one definitely, or Final Fantasy VII if it ever gets re-released. And
yeah.
of course, that's not going to be turn-based either, but
no,
Anyway, yeah, that's what I would recommend.
Yeah, I think on that note, that's a wrap on our Final Fantasy one-shot here.
Sweet.
I just want to say thanks for being on the podcast today here. I'm glad we I'm glad we finally got to do this. It's been a long time coming.
For sure. It's something you've really gotten into, podcasting, and there's so many topics to talk about.
Oh, so many
to go on. But I hope this was at least a little informative about one of my favorite series.
I feel like I've learned a lot.
Yeah, yeah. Again, it's a big series to just jump into.
Yeah. Like, I'm sure. I mean, this series is a podcast in itself. You could create a weekly podcast just based on this fucking series. But I feel like one thing we should do before going is we should plug some of your stuff. You have an album that can be downloaded and streamed at quite a few places. Anyone listening should go check that out. It is titled "The Wrecking Season" by Black Shore. Where are all the places that's available? It's quite a few, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, pretty much anywhere if you want to get digital music and streaming, like Spotify. That's probably the easiest place to listen to it.
Yeah. That's my go-to.
It's on Apple Music.
Yeah.
It's on Bandcamp, where you can also purchase it.
Of course. Google Play?
So
are you on Google Play?
Yep.
Good stuff.
I think it's also on YouTube now, because YouTube just launched YouTube Music.
Oh, yeah?
Where it was only on YouTube Red, but that's only in the States.
Yeah.
So we couldn't get it here exactly. But I think it's on YouTube Music now. A friend of mine has shown it to me.
Cool.
But, any of those digital shopping places you can get it on.
Yep.
If you like, some heavy rock music with some metal elements and some prog elements, then you might like it.
My best description is there's I don't know, it's hard to describe exactly. It's hard rock. It definitely has elements of the Tea Party. And I've always heard like little tinges of REM in there.
Yeah. I wear my influences on my sleeve sometimes.
Yeah.
Sometimes.
Of course.
You can definitely hear it if you look for it.
Yeah. Great album. I definitely recommend it to everybody listening. Got to plug your stuff, man. You always got to plug your stuff.
I appreciate that. Thanks.
And speaking of plugging your stuff, if you like what you heard here today, you can always check out other episodes of the main podcast, Jedi Dropouts, spin-offs, Final Form, the Dropout Report. We're doing too much stuff to list these days. You can check that out over at www.jedidropouts.podbean.com or wherever you listen to your podcasts. Going to be coming back soon. I don't know when I'm going to release this episode exactly, but Jedi Dropouts will be coming back sometime this week, and I'm up to my ears in podcasts that I am planning and working on at the moment. So stay tuned for all of that. And, we should probably get together and do another one of these sometime on another subject, because this was a lot of fun.
Yeah, sure, yeah. Almost anything, because I'm into a lot of sci-fi and fantasy and all of that geeky stuff. And music, and there's a whole other thing we could do with music. But, this is really fun.
There's a deep well of stuff we could talk about.
Yeah.
So, thanks again for coming on the show, and thanks to everyone at home for listening. Don't really have a sign-off for this, so you want to leave anyone at home, any parting words of advice here?
No, I don't know. Other than, may your loot drops be plentiful.
Perfect. Excellent. Later.